Hi everyone, and welcome to The Sleepy Scientist. I'm really happy you're here. Tonight, we're going to go on a calm and quiet trip to learn something amazing. So get comfy, take a deep breath, and let's enjoy this peaceful science story together. Before we start, tell me in the comments, where are you watching from and what time is it for you right now? If you like relaxing science videos, don't forget to tap the like button. Now let's begin.
Somewhere beyond what most telescopes can see, farther than any ship has flown, the universe holds its breath. In the coldest corners where galaxies bloom like frost upon glass, something ancient stirs. Between the spirals of stars and the slow swirl of dust, there is a whisper, soft and essential. It is oxygen, light, invisible, and yet the quiet signature of life's possibility. Long before we named it, before lungs rose and fell or leaves fluttered in the sun, oxygen wandered through space, not as clouds or winds, but as atoms forged in fire. The first stars, massive and brief, were the alchemists of the cosmos. In their hearts, hydrogen and helium danced under pressure so great they fused into heavier elements, carbon, nitrogen, and then oxygen. And when those stars collapsed, they spilled their contents across space like shimmering ashes. So the breath between stars began long ago, not in the lungs of animals or the veins of trees, but in supernovae, those brilliant deaths that make new beginnings. In the silent vacuum, oxygen drifted, joining newborn planets, blending into comets, hiding in ice. Some of it made its way here, long before our Earth had air to hold. Now imagine looking out across that vast dark, beyond the reach of sound or time. Scientists point their instruments to the edge of what we know and listen with light. They capture tiny ripples, spectrums stretched by distance and age. And within these signals they find fingerprints, absorption lines that speak of elements. One such fingerprint belongs to oxygen. Detected in the earliest galaxies, it speaks softly of stars that once breathed and died. But what does it mean to find oxygen at the edge of the universe? It means that even in the deepest night there are hints of warmth, that the building blocks of breath were scattered far and wide, waiting for the right place, the right moment to form something more. On Earth, oxygen fills our lungs with every inhale, but in space it is rarer, quieter, hidden in the folds of gravity and time. In those early galaxies, oxygen was a trace, just a few atoms among many, but its presence reveals a story, that the stars had lived long enough to create it and to release it into the void. It means that those galaxies, though ancient, had already begun their journey toward complexity, that in the cold and the dark, the seeds of breath had taken root. Let's drift deeper now into one such galaxy, faint, red-shifted, nearly invisible except to the most sensitive instruments. Here, over 13 billion years ago, the universe was young. There were no planets yet, no suns with stable orbits, just clouds of gas collapsing, igniting, burning out. And yet, inside that chaos, stars were already weaving the elements that would one day become oceans, blood, and air. The oxygen we see from that distance is not the same as the oxygen we breathe. It has not flowed through trees or mingled with sunlight, but it is kindred, a cousin across time. The same kind of atom, created under pressure, bound by laws that reach across the cosmos. It reminds us that everything we need was made in the same places, from the same materials, by the same ancient hands. The breath between stars is not just a metaphor. It is a truth written in light, a truth that tells us life's elements are not Earth's alone, that the capacity for breath, for motion, for memory exists far beyond our skies. Every time we detect oxygen in a distant galaxy, we glimpse a chapter in the story of becoming, a story older than Earth, written in flame, carried on winds of silence. And perhaps that's what makes the discovery so moving, not just the science, but the poetry. To find oxygen in the oldest light is to find a reflection of ourselves, a mirror made not of glass, but of atoms, a sign that even at the edge of time, the universe was already breathing its quiet breath. So close your eyes now and imagine that breath, soft, wide, and ancient, carried on starlight, hidden in the silence, waiting still between the stars. Let's drift deeper now, beyond the shimmer of distant galaxies, and into the quiet where the first stars once flickered. The light that carried their story still travels, though the stars themselves have long gone dark. And in that light, nestled within wavelengths stretched thin by time, we find a thread, oxygen, whispering its presence from across eternity. When scientists peer into the cosmos, they don't see with eyes alone. They use radio waves and infrared, ultraviolet, and X-ray. They gather starlight in mirrored dishes and chill their instruments to near absolute zero so even the faintest warmth can be detected. And there, hidden in the flow of photons, lies the story of ancient oxygen. It does not shout, it does not glow, but it absorbs light in a pattern uniquely its own, leaving behind a signature like a fingerprint on glass. This oxygen, found billions of light-years away, tells us something remarkable, that the early universe as not empty, not silent, but alive with creation. Galaxies then were small and chaotic, tumbling clouds of gas and dust. Yet within their swirling arms, stars were born and died in quick succession. These stars did not live long. They were massive, burning hot and fast. And when they died, they seeded space with the heavier elements they forged in their hearts. Among them was oxygen, released into the interstellar medium. It drifted into cold gas clouds, clung to dust grains, and mingled with hydrogen to form water ice. Some of it became part of new stars. Some clung to the edges of planetary disks that would never birth planets. And some, quietly, began the long journey toward us, carried on light that traveled through an ever-expanding sea of darkness. Imagine now a universe just a few 100 million years old. The cosmic microwave background still glows faintly, a remnant of the Big Bang. Matter has begun to collect into filaments and clusters. In pockets of density, gravity pulls gas into itself, igniting stars. The first oxygen appears not in breath or biology, but as an echo of fusion, a residue of collapse. And now, over 13 billion years later, we find it. We find the presence of oxygen in one of the earliest galaxies ever detected, not by scooping it, not by capturing it in jars, but by interpreting the language of light. That light has traveled for eons, unchanged, unbent except by the gentle curve of gravity. And when it arrives at our telescopes, it carries with it the memory of where it came from, a memory written in wavelengths and shadows. But science is not the only way to understand what this means. Sometimes in the hush between thoughts, in the lull of a winter night, you might feel it, a connection to something older than yourself, something made of the same stuff as your own breath. The oxygen in your blood once belonged to stars, to explosions that shook the cosmos. And so too does this distant oxygen, now found at the edge of what we can observe. We are not made asterisk from the stars. We are made asterisk with asterisk them. Alongside them, in rhythm with their rise and fall. That idea that oxygen is universal, that it appears wherever stars have lived and died, draws a soft line between us and the most distant galaxies. It is a thread, faint and golden, linking lungs to fusion cores, breath to light. It reminds us that the laws of nature are not confined to Earth. The same processes that give us air give galaxies their glow. The same chemistry that lets us dream also shaped the first molecules of water on icy comets. And as astronomers continue to search, they find oxygen in unexpected places, in distant quasars, in dwarf galaxies, in the halos around massive star clusters. Its presence is always quiet but meaningful. It doesn't mean life is there, but it means life could be, that the ingredients are being stirred, that the soup of the cosmos has begun to simmer. So why does this matter? Why does a faint line in a spectrum, recorded by a satellite, hold such power? Because it is evidence. Gentle cosmic evidence that we are part of a larger story. Not the center, not the climax, but a soft continuation. The universe breathes in cycles, and we for a moment are one of its inhales. To find oxygen out, there is to find ourselves reflected, not in image, but in substance. The discovery also pushes us to wonder, how much more is waiting? If oxygen exists in these ancient galaxies, what else might lie hidden? Carbon, nitrogen, even simple organic compounds. The early universe may have been younger, but it was already rich, already capable of complexity, already setting the stage for life to one day emerge on a quiet blue planet. And perhaps one day we will detect not just the breath of stars, but the breath of something more. A signal from a world too far to reach, a chemical echo of life forming independently. If we find oxygen paired with methane, paired with water vapor, we might begin to whisper the word, habitable, or even alive. But for now, oxygen remains our quiet witness, a traveler from the past, a companion to hydrogen, a partner in fire and water alike. Its signature reminds us of stellar furnaces, of icy comets, of rusting rocks and living cells. It is both fragile and enduring, a molecule of memory. As we gaze up into the sky, we inhale without thinking, yet in that act lies a miracle. Every breath we take is a connection to the stars. And every star that lived and died long before we arrived left behind a breath of its own, waiting in the light, patient, silent, found only when we learned to listen. Now imagine you are drifting in that quiet dark, where galaxies swirl like scattered seeds and time itself moves slowly. There is no sound here, only the soft hum of cosmic background radiation and the gentle tug of gravity shaping the dance of matter. Somewhere in this stillness, the oxygen atoms we traced earlier are still moving. They do not age like we do. They do not forget. They carry within them the story of everything they've touched, from the core of a dying star to the icy shell of a distant moon. And here on Earth, each breath we take mirrors their journey. We inhale and exhale without noticing, yet the oxygen that fills our lungs is ancient. It has circled the globe for millennia. It has passed through forests, through fires, through oceans and ice caps. It has nourished insects, dinosaurs, birds, and us. And always it returns, shaped by the rhythm of life, transformed by the lungs of living things. This delicate cycle is not just Earth's, it is the rhythm of the universe itself. Stars breathe in their own way. They gather, ignite, expand, and release. They take in hydrogen and release energy, forging new elements in their cores. And when they can no longer hold themselves together, they scatter those elements across space. It is not chaos, it is breath, slow, celestial, and continuous. In the earliest galaxies where we've detected oxygen, there were no trees or oceans, no animals to use it. But the potential was already there. The raw ingredients for breath, for fire, for water. The stars had given what they could, and the universe received it quietly. Over time, those galaxies evolved. Some merged with others. Some vanished into black holes. Some perhaps continued on, building complexity atom by atom, molecule by molecule. Now we stand at the edge of that understanding. With instruments tuned to the sky and minds open to wonder, we search for signs not just of existence, but of connection. We don't need to touch the oxygen in those faraway galaxies to know it's there. Its fingerprint in the light is enough. It tells us that we share something with those distant places, that the same forces that formed their stars also formed ours, that the chemistry of breath is not a local accident, but a universal tendency. And so the question gently unfolds. If oxygen is there and water too, what else might arise? Could breath itself one day be drawn by a creature we've never met, beneath a sky we'll never see? Could lungs or gills or leaves open in unison with ours, carried by the same rhythm, fueled by the same atom? Science cannot answer this yet. But the presence of oxygen tells us that the stage is set, that the play of life, if it appears elsewhere, will not begin from nothing. In this way, the discovery is both humbling and hopeful. It reminds us that we are not alone, not in the sense of visitors or signals, but in the deeper sense of material kinship. The universe is not a stranger's place. It is our home and has been since before we were born. The atoms that make us are scattered everywhere. They belong to stars and comets, to clouds of dust and rings of ice. They are part of galaxies so faint we can barely see them, and yet they carry pieces of us. Or perhaps we carry pieces of them. Even the Earth, with all its colors and life, is just one place where these atoms have come together in a special way. The oxygen here has found a path into blood, into thought, into song. But that path could be mirrored elsewhere, guided by the same physics, the same chemistry, the same quiet laws. We do not know where or when, but the possibility lingers in every spectral line, in every trace of distant oxygen. And maybe that's the heart of the story, not just the science, but the feeling. The idea that something as invisible as breath can link us to galaxies beyond sight, that in the act of breathing, we are participating in a cosmic rhythm older than time, that every inhale is a thread in a vast, unfolding tapestry of creation. So as we close this story, picture that tapestry. Picture the stars weaving it stitch by stitch, with light and gravity as their loom. Picture the galaxies as petals on a great cosmic flower, each carrying within it the seeds of future breath. Picture yourself lying still beneath the night sky, the air cool in your chest, the silence wide and waiting. And know this, the oxygen that keeps you alive once belonged to stars. The oxygen at the edge of the universe is not a stranger, it is kin. It is a message, slow and soft, carried on light. A message that says, you are not alone, you never were. You are part of a breath that began long before Earth and will continue long after. The breath between stars is still moving, still whispering, still waiting to be heard. In the far reaches of the universe, galaxies move like drifting clouds, immense, luminous, and slow. From a great distance they appear silent, like paintings of light against a black canvas. But step closer, not with feet but with thought, and you begin to feel something gentle and alive. These galaxies, made of countless stars and rivers of dust, are not static. They breathe, not in the way lungs do, but in a cycle just as meaningful. They pull in gas, forge stars, and exhale the energy and elements that shape the cosmos. Where galaxies exhale, the universe listens. This breath is not wind or vapor, it is the motion of matter, the sweeping of stellar winds, the bursts of supernovae, the gentle leakage of gas from galactic halos. These are the signs of galaxies giving back, pushing out the things they've made in their bright, crowded centers. Oxygen, carbon, iron, and light. These are the exhalations of the cosmos, invisible but powerful. They stretch across millions of light years, carrying the stories of billions of stars. At the heart of many galaxies lies a black hole, a dense and quiet engine. Around it, stars orbit in graceful spirals, while gas clouds collide and compress, sparking new creation. But not all matter stays confined. Some is heated by the birth of stars. Some is driven outward by radiation or shock waves. This is galactic outflow, a slow, steady exhale that releases enriched gas into intergalactic space. Without it, the universe would remain plain and simple. With it, the elements of life are scattered like seeds in the wind. In the early days of the cosmos, galaxies were smaller and more chaotic. They formed quickly, fed by streams of cold gas pulled from the vast web of matter that connects everything. These galaxies were busy places, hot with new stars, thick with dust, and bright with ultraviolet light. They inhaled gas from their surroundings and used it to grow. But with every burst of growth came pressure and eventually a need to release. They exhaled. Not all at once, not in violent gusts, but in slow waves of motion that carried heat and metal out into the void. This exhalation shaped everything. The space between galaxies, once nearly empty, became rich with the leftovers of stars. Oxygen atoms floated between clusters, carried by galactic winds. Carbon drifted through filaments of gas, waiting for the gravity of a young world to pull it close. Even today, much of the oxygen in the universe does not sit inside galaxies. It hovers outside them, in halos of diffuse gas, or in the vast spaces that stretch between one swirl of stars and the next. It is not gone, it is waiting. These flows are not always visible, but they leave signs. Astronomers study galaxies near and far, measuring their light, watching for faint emissions and shadowed lines. In the ultraviolet glow of hot gas, they find outflows. In the alignment of certain spectral patterns, they see motion, gas being pushed out, sometimes at hundreds of kilometers per second. And in those outflows, they find oxygen, not as breath in the lungs of creatures, but as breath from the galaxy itself, an offering of its inner life. Now let your thoughts float outward, far above the disk of a spiral galaxy. Imagine the curve of stars below, the slow spin of starlight and shadow, and rising from that brilliant plane, invisible waves of heated gas drift upward. These are not violent, they are soft, like mist rising from warm earth. Within them, atoms of oxygen ride the current, carried high into the halo and beyond. They may never return, or they may fall back in time, cooled and heavy, pulled again into the cycle of creation. The breath of a galaxy is slow. It may take hundreds of millions of years to complete a single exhale, but across that time, it gives the universe the tools to build. Without galactic winds, without these exhaled elements, future generations of stars and planets could not form. It is a quiet generosity, built into the fabric of cosmic evolution. This is how the universe grows complex, not all at once but gradually through the patient work of stars and galaxies. Each exhale adds something new to the mix, and each place that receives it becomes richer, more prepared for something like life. The oxygen in our own atmosphere was once trapped in stone. Before that, it was inside the Earth. And before that, it traveled through space, formed in the heart of a long-dead star, exhaled by a galaxy long before ours. So when we speak of galactic breath, we are speaking of history, of memory, of motion that has no need for lungs or air. We are speaking of a universe that, though vast and cold, has a rhythm all its own. Galaxies inhale gas, form stars, and exhale light and matter. It is not poetry alone. It is physics, but within that physics there is beauty. As we lie beneath the night sky and breathe quietly, we mirror something much larger. Our inhale may be just a moment, but it connects us to cycles older than time. The galaxies above us have been breathing far longer than we've known how to look, and with each breath, they make the universe more like us, or perhaps more like itself. In the places where galaxies exhale, creation continues, oxygen drifts, light travels, and somewhere across the quiet dark something new begins. Now drift with the exhaled breath of a galaxy, out beyond its luminous arms, into the pale and whispering dark. This is the circumgalactic medium, a wide, invisible cocoon of gas that surrounds every galaxy like a ghostly atmosphere. It is here that much of the universe's oxygen hides, not glowing, not obvious, but quietly drifting in the thin fog of time. Scientists once believed that most of the matter in the universe was lost, unaccounted for. But as their instruments grew more precise, they began to notice the signs. The exhaled winds of galaxies had not vanished. They had only become subtle, spread thin, scattered wide. This is not a place of chaos. It is a cradle of possibility. As galaxies breathe out, they fill this space with the ashes of their stars, oxygen among them, forged in nuclear fire and carried outward by momentum and heat. The gas here is hot, too hot to condense into stars, but not lifeless. It holds memory, it holds history, and it waits. Over billions of years, this material may cool, fall inward, and become fuel again. In this way, the breath of a galaxy is not waste. It is recycling, a slow, circular pattern that sustains the universe's evolution. And we are only just beginning to see it. When astronomers point their telescopes toward galaxies both near and ancient, they use a trick of light to study the invisible. They observe quasars, bright beacons powered by supermassive black holes that sit far behind the galaxies they wish to study. As the quasar's light travels toward Earth, it passes through the gas surrounding the galaxy. And in that passing, the gas leaves fingerprints, small absorptions in the spectrum, subtle dips in brightness at precise wavelengths. Among those fingerprints, scientists find oxygen. It may be ionized or cold, thin or dense, but always it tells a story. It reveals the temperature, the velocity, the composition of the exhaled breath. And with this information, researchers build a map, not of stars, but of the material between them. A map made of whispers, a map of what galaxies leave behind. What surprises many is how much oxygen exists beyond the galaxies themselves. The stars and planets we see are only part of the picture. The halos of gas surrounding galaxies may contain more mass than all the stars within. In our own Milky Way, this halo stretches far beyond the visible edge, forming a sphere of rarefied matter that interacts quietly with the cosmos around it. And in that halo floats oxygen, exhaled long ago by stars that burned and died before Earth had even formed. It is a humbling truth. Much of the oxygen that galaxies create never forms part of a planet. It drifts instead, waiting, perhaps endlessly, for the right conditions to gather and grow. And even then, its path is uncertain. It may fall into a new galaxy, become part of a star-forming region, or remain in the halo for eons, warmed only by the ambient heat of the universe. Still, this drifting breath has meaning. It is the raw material of future worlds. Without it, the next generation of stars would lack the elements needed to form planets, oceans, and air. Life as we know it requires a certain complexity, a mix of carbon, nitrogen, and oxygen. And galaxies, through their steady breathing, provide it, not deliberately, not with purpose, but with a kind of cosmic patience that allows complexity to emerge. And it's not only star formation that pushes matter outward. Supermassive black holes, quiet giants in the hearts of galaxies, can also drive vast outflows. As gas falls toward them, it heats and accelerates, sometimes launching jets of energy and matter that blast into space. These outflows can stretch for hundreds of thousands of light years, carving tunnels through the intergalactic medium. And within them, too, scientists have detected oxygen, carried not by winds but by waves of radiation and gravity. These exhalations are more than scientific curiosities. They help regulate the growth of galaxies. By pushing matter outward, they prevent runaway star formation. They cool the galactic centers. They stir the surrounding medium. And in doing so, they shape the evolution of the entire cosmos. The breath of galaxies is both nourishment and control, growth and restraint, expansion and balance. Now think again of your own breath. Inhale, exhale. Each cycle lasts only seconds, but repeats thousands of times each day. The breath of a galaxy may take 1 billion years, but it too repeats. The material flows out, cools, returns, and begins again. This rhythm echoes through scales vast and small, connecting the living and the stellar in quiet symmetry. And perhaps that is why the discovery of oxygen in the halos of galaxies feels so significant. It's not only that it proves something about stellar life cycles, it's that it reminds us of our place in the universe. The atoms in your lungs may once have floated in such a halo. They may have been part of a supernova's breath, carried on galactic winds before settling into the dust that formed our sun, our Earth, and you. The universe is not indifferent, it is participatory. It responds to the rules of physics, yes, but it also creates paths of beauty. Out of hydrogen comes fusion. Out of fusion comes oxygen. Out of oxygen comes the possibility of breath, of fire, of rust, of life. And each of these arises not in isolation, but as part of a greater motion, the slow, patient breathing of galaxies across the void. So when you next gaze at the night sky and feel the air moving through your chest, remember the halos. Remember the oxygen drifting invisibly in space. Remember the galaxies that gave it. And remember, too, that you are not separate from this motion. You are an echo of it, a continuation, a quiet breath returned to the cosmos. Now let us return not to the crowded heart of a galaxy, but to its outermost breath, where the faintest traces of oxygen drift like memories. Here, far beyond the spiral arms and starlit disks, lies the quiet edge, the place where galaxies slowly fade into the cosmic dark. It is easy to imagine this as an ending, a final exhale lost to space. But in truth, this is another beginning. For every atom of oxygen that leaves a galaxy, a journey begins. A journey through silence, through time, through the vast in-between. Some of this oxygen will never return. It will hover in the intergalactic medium, bathed in the dim background light of ancient stars. It will drift past galaxy clusters and cold clouds, perhaps pulled slightly by gravity but never caught. And still it waits, not in stillness but in motion too slow for eyes to see. Perhaps someday it will be gathered again by a forming galaxy, by a star system not yet born. Perhaps it will find a home on a planet with oceans and clouds and breath. Or perhaps it will continue on forever, a traveler in the dark. Other oxygen atoms fall back. They cool and spiral inward, rejoining the galactic disk in slow, spiraling arcs. Over millions of years, they may become part of a dense cloud. That cloud may collapse under its own gravity, triggering the birth of new stars. In the warm, bright cradles of stellar nurseries, the oxygen is stirred again, this time into water, into rocks, into the thin atmospheres of newborn worlds. This recycled breath becomes part of new chapters, each written in different light. This is how galaxies give and how they grow. Their exhalations are not waste, they are renewal. The oxygen found in the furthest reaches of galactic halos is not a forgotten remnant, it is potential. And we here on Earth are living proof of what that potential can become. The air we breathe today once existed as a ripple in a far-off galaxy. It journeyed through space and time, touched by nothing but laws of motion before becoming part of the blue sky above us. And this knowledge carries a quiet wonder. It means we are not only observers of the universe, we are made from it, not metaphorically but literally. Every cell in our bodies holds atoms that once floated through stars. Every breath we take returns us to that story, a story of galaxies exhaling and of life inhaling their gifts. It also changes how we see distance. 13 billion light-years may feel impossibly far, but the atoms from those distances live inside us now. There is no true separation, only time, only transformation. The universe we look up at is not another place. It is the origin of our breath, our blood, our being. When oxygen was first detected in galaxies at the edge of the observable universe, it was not a lonely signal. It was a message that said, this, too, is part of you. And so we must wonder, if breath can travel this far, what else might it carry? What wisdom lies in these drifting elements, not in words but in patterns, in the gentle logic of chemistry, in the patient shaping of stars and clouds? Perhaps in every galaxy there is a quiet intelligence, not conscious but consistent, a slow unfolding of matter into complexity, guided not by thought but by the fertile rules of physics. From this perspective, even silence becomes meaningful. The spaces between galaxies are not empty. They are full of motion too slow to see, of particles too small to touch. But they move, they carry, they connect. The breath of a galaxy does not vanish. It is absorbed, scattered, recombined. It may become part of a comet, part of a moon, part of a heartbeat. And through all these changes, it remains what it has always been: oxygen, quiet and powerful. The next time we detect such oxygen in a far-off halo, we will know more than its temperature or velocity. We will know its path. We will understand that it came from somewhere, a star, a death, an explosion, and that it is going somewhere else. It is never still. It is always part of the cycle. And we, as fleeting as we may be, are swept into that cycle with every breath. There is comfort in this. The breath of galaxies is vast, but it is not cold. It is the reason life can begin. It is the trace left behind when something burns bright and ends beautifully. And though we may never visit these distant places, though we may never touch the gas that floats there, we do not need to. We are already joined to them by our ver. Why makeup? The universe does not need to shout its wonders. It whispers them in spectral lines and drifting atoms, in starbursts and halos. It breathes gently and endlessly, and from that breath all things come. You, reading this now, are part of that breath. You are stardust made into motion, into memory, into voice. And the galaxies, those quiet giants turning slowly in the dark, continue to exhale. Their breath moves outward, always outward, shaping the world you know and the world still to come. So lie still now. Let your own breath rise and fall. And remember, in this quiet rhythm, you are mirroring the cosmos. The galaxies exhale, and so do you. The oxygen in your lungs once drifted through the stars. You are not apart from the universe. You are how it breathes. In the earliest ages of the universe, before the stars had found their steady rhythm, there was only darkness and the faintest glow of leftover heat. It was a time before color, before shape, before anything we would recognize as familiar. Yet even in that ancient dark, the seeds of light were stirring. And with them, hidden in the hot silence, the elements that would one day build breath were waiting. Among them was oxygen, silent, invisible, and filled with potential. It had not yet formed. It had not yet existed, but already the forces that would one day summon it into being were quietly arranging the stage. The first stars were not like the stars we know now. They were giants, monstrous and brief, made almost entirely of hydrogen and helium. They lived fast and died young, collapsing into black holes or exploding in brilliant supernovae that tore the sky apart. In those last moments, their hearts reached unimaginable temperatures, and there, in those final seconds, fusion began its delicate dance. From the simplest elements came the first whispers of complexity: carbon, nitrogen, and finally, oxygen. In that blaze of death, something new was born. The universe was still young then. There were no planets yet, no galaxies in their full form, but oxygen had begun to drift. It was born in violence, but it moved with grace. It scattered across the vastness, hitching rides on shockwaves, floating in expanding clouds of gas. It mixed with hydrogen to make water, clung to grains of cosmic dust, and waited. Always it waited, not for us, not for life, but simply for the right conditions to arise again. To detect oxygen from that age is not easy. The light has traveled for billions of years, stretched by time, dimmed by distance. But still, it arrives. Scientists use space telescopes to sift through that ancient light, hunting for signs that something heavier than helium was already present in the earliest galaxies. When they find it, when they spot the faint signature of ionized oxygen, it is like finding a breath in the middle of a storm. A quiet signal from the dawn of time, telling us that the darkness was never empty. And yet there is a paradox. Oxygen, the element that makes fire burn and lungs rise, was formed in places too hot for life. It was born in the collapse of stars, in the same violence that ends one story and begins another. This is the nature of the cosmos. It makes the softest things in the hardest ways. It takes explosions to create breath. It takes darkness to prepare for light. The light we see from those early galaxies is not bright. It is stretched into the infrared, faint and cool. It flickers at the edge of detectability, but within it the presence of oxygen glows just enough to be known. It does not shine like a torch. It glows like a memory. And in that glow we read a message. The universe was already preparing for life, even when it seemed least ready. These galaxies were small, chaotic, and full of movement. Gas swirled wildly, colliding and collapsing. New stars formed in dense knots of matter, and with them new cycles began. Some stars would live long enough to enrich their surroundings gently. Others would die fast, scattering their interiors across vast distances. Oxygen flowed through all of it, never alone, always entangled with the processes of change. Now imagine holding your breath under a sky filled not with constellations, but with clouds of gas glowing in soft hues. Imagine drifting through one of those early galaxies, the stars flickering like candles, the dust thick enough to hide entire clusters. Here, oxygen is not a breath yet. It is a possibility. It is suspended between heat and cool, between creation and destruction, and it is beautiful. What we learn from studying this oxygen is not only the science of star formation, but the poetry of cosmic patience. For even when the universe was barely 1 billion years old, it was already building toward something more. The presence of oxygen means that stars had lived and died, that processes had completed their cycles, that the universe was not just expanding, it was evolving. This changes how we see darkness. It is no longer the absence of light, but the shelter in which light is formed. It is not a void, but a cradle. The galaxies that carried the first oxygen were not bright enough to shape the night sky, but they were working quietly, endlessly. And now, across time, their efforts reach us in the form of spectral lines and subtle shifts. They tell us that the dark was always more than it seemed. And so, oxygen in the darkest light is not just a phrase. It is a truth, a reminder that even in the places we cannot see, the ingredients for breath are assembling. Even in silence, something is singing. Even in darkness, something is being made. Let's drift deeper into that ancient glow, where galaxies shimmer like distant embers in the long night. These early galaxies, though small and scattered, were busy. Their stars pulsed with light that had never been seen before, and within their cores, fusion began shaping the elements that would color the universe. Oxygen was among the first of those essential elements to be created in any meaningful abundance. It joined the story early, born in stellar hearts and released in bursts that rippled across the growing cosmos. Yet even then, it remained elusive, present but hidden, glowing in light so faint that it would take the cleverest of instruments to reveal it. To trace oxygen in these galaxies is to search not for brightness, but for the subtle shadows oxygen casts in light. When light from a galaxy travels across time and reaches our telescopes, some of it has been absorbed by the oxygen that once drifted there. These faint dips in the spectrum tell us more than brightness ever could. They whisper of the conditions inside those galaxies, of the heat, the density, the age of their stars. And more than that, they whisper of time itself, of how far that light has traveled, how long those atoms have waited to be known. The earliest oxygen was mostly ionized. That means it had lost some of its electrons, stripped away by the heat of young, massive stars. These energetic stars lived short lives, but they flooded their galaxies with ultraviolet light, carving ionized regions into the surrounding gas. In those glowing pockets, oxygen atoms absorbed and emitted light in distinct ways, leaving behind the signatures we detect today. These lines are fragile and fleeting. They appear only when the balance of temperature and density is just right, but when they appear, they are unmistakable. They are the breath marks of a galaxy learning to shine. But these galaxies were not peaceful. They collided with each other, merged into larger structures, sent gas flowing in strange directions. Some were shaped into spirals, others remained irregular like brushstrokes flung across space. Through all this motion, oxygen was carried along, mixed into dust clouds and heated in starbursts. It did not stay still. It did not settle. It moved with the universe, obeying gravity, light, and time. And so slowly, the darkest light began to carry color. Not visible color, but chemical richness. Oxygen mixed with hydrogen to form water vapor in the cool outskirts of some galaxies. Elsewhere, it became part of carbon dioxide or sulfur oxides, or was absorbed onto the surfaces of icy dust grains. These molecules would not become oceans or air for a long, long time, but their presence marked a shift. The universe was no longer just hydrogen and helium. It had learned to breathe complexity. What scientists now understand is that the process of enrichment began early, far earlier than they once believed. The detection of oxygen in galaxies over 13 billion light-years away tells us that stars were forming, living, and dying within a few 100 million years of the Big Bang. That is a short breath, cosmically speaking, and yet already it contained all the patterns we still see today. Star formation, fusion, collapse, explosion, release. These cycles began in the dark, and they have not stopped since. And in each of these cycles, oxygen plays a quiet role. It is not the most abundant element, but it is one of the most influential. It affects how stars evolve, how galaxies cool, how planets form. In the interstellar medium, oxygen contributes to the chemistry of life's building blocks. It enables water, which enables stability, which allows molecules to fold and hold memory. Without oxygen, life as we know it would not be possible. And yet, the universe created it long before life even existed. Now think of a galaxy so far away that its light is older than our planet. That light has stretched and thinned as space expanded, and yet it still holds oxygen's fingerprint. Inside that galaxy, a supernova once tore apart a star, scattering oxygen across the void. Some of it may have entered a young nebula, some may have escaped into intergalactic space, and some, just a small trace, contributed to the light that now reaches our eyes. That's the oxygen we detect, not in air, not in water, but in ancient energy, carried across billions of years. And this changes us. It expands how we define connection. We are not only related to Earth and its cycles. We are tied to galaxies we will never touch, to stars that died before our solar system formed. The atoms in our bodies are the product of stellar stories written in the darkest light. And oxygen, with its subtle glow and gentle movement, is one of the main characters in that cosmic tale. We often imagine space as empty, but it is filled with this slow exchange of matter, breath given and received, creation shared between stars and time. The universe is not cold in its intention. It is warm in its pattern. It returns to the same processes again and again, building what is needed for life to one day open its eyes. And oxygen, floating invisibly through it all, ensures that those eyes may one day breathe, speak, wonder. This is why we search for oxygen in the darkest corners of the sky, not only to prove a theory or complete a chart, but to understand the origin of breath. The first oxygen was born in silence, but it made all future voices possible. It made flame, water, rust, memory. And even now it moves, invisible, persistent, luminous only in the light it shapes. Now let us return once more to that faint, ancient light, still crossing the universe to reach us. Imagine it not as a beam, but as a thread, fine, fragile, glowing with secrets. Carried within that thread is a quiet story, one of stellar births and endings, of particles shaped and shared, of oxygen's long and patient voyage. In this final part of the journey, we begin to see how something so simple becomes something profound, not just in the fabric of galaxies, but in the meaning it brings to life. By the time that oxygen reached our galaxy, billions of years had passed. Stars were forming here too, in spirals and bursts, building heavy elements just as others had long before. But now the cosmos was more complex. Dust swirled in denser clouds. Planets began to form around young stars, and oxygen, this same element born in the heat of early stars, joined the process again. It became part of icy grains in protoplanetary disks. It helped shape atmospheres and oceans. It settled into stone and, eventually, into cells. On Earth, oxygen is everywhere, though we often forget it. It's in the water that laps at our shores, in the breeze that moves through trees, in the blood moving quietly through our veins. We think of it as ordinary, but it is a miracle of timing. A miracle of cycles repeating, of stars that lived and died in perfect rhythm to give us what we need. The oxygen we breathe was not made here. It was carried here. Made by other suns, exhaled into the void, gathered by our forming planet like a memory wrapped in dust. But Earth is not the only place where this element matters. Across the cosmos, other worlds may be stirring, each shaped by the same patterns of fusion and collapse. Astronomers have already detected hints of oxygen in the atmospheres of distant exoplanets. Not enough to prove life, not yet, but enough to suggest that the rhythms we know may not be unique. That somewhere in the shadows of another star, oxygen may be breathing again. And what would that mean? Not that life is common or inevitable, but that the ingredients are scattered like seeds on the wind, that the universe does not hoard its gifts, it shares them. It offers them in every direction, waiting only for the right spark, the right balance, the right slowness to take hold. Perhaps life elsewhere will not be like ours. Perhaps it will not need lungs or leaves, but if it breathes, in any sense of the word, it may breathe oxygen, and that alone binds us together. The darkest light has given us this truth, not through images, but through lines and shadows. We have built instruments that can hear the whispers of distant galaxies and read the chemistry of their breath. We have reached through time not to take, but to understand, to know where we come from. And in doing so, we've found that oxygen has been a quiet companion through it all, first in stars, then in dust, then in water, then in life. Even now it continues. Stars form and die every day. New galaxies emerge in the deepest dark. And oxygen, always in motion, continues its path. It does not choose. It simply follows the rules of energy and gravity, gathering when it must, releasing when it must. It is not alive, and yet it enables life. It holds the line between flame and breath, between stillness and movement, and in that quiet role it becomes essential. So the next time you look up at the sky and see only blackness, remember the light you cannot see. Remember the galaxies whose brightness has faded into time, but whose breath still travels. Remember that inside you, right now, are atoms that have known that darkness, that have been warmed by stars you will never know, that have crossed the gulf of space not to arrive, but to become something new. We are not observers of oxygen's story, we are. Each chapter's within it. Each breath we take continues a tale that began when the first stars lit the sky. Each moment of life is built on the quiet gifts of galaxies that rose and fell before Earth had form. And if life continues beyond us, on other worlds in other forms, it will do so with the same gifts shared across the stars. This is the truth found in the darkest light, that even in silence there is preparation, even in stillness there is becoming. The first oxygen did not know where it was going. It was born in heat and cast into dark, but it arrived eventually in places where it could bloom, in coral reefs and forest canopies, in thunderstorms and symphonies, in voices soft and strong. And now in you. The oxygen in your lungs carries the memory of a universe that has been breathing for billions of years. A universe that glowed before there were eyes to see it. A universe that built beauty from the ashes of stars. You are part of that beauty now. Your breath continues the pattern. Your life completes the circle. And so the story ends, not with a silence, but with a breath. In, out, soft as light, old as the stars, waiting still to be told again. There are winds on Earth that rustle trees, shape dunes, and cool the skin. They are born of pressure and motion, of sun-warmed surfaces and spinning skies. But in the vast quiet of space there are winds too colder, wider, older than any breeze we've ever felt. These are not winds of air, but of particles, of energy, of atoms born in fire now drifting across the cosmos. And among them, oxygen moves like a whisper. It is carried not in gusts, but in flows that span galaxies. This is the wind that crossed the void, the silent traveler from star to star, from past to present. Imagine it now, the heart of a dying star, massive and trembling, preparing for collapse. In its final moments, it throws its outer layers into space. That explosion, a supernova, sends shockwaves rushing outward at unimaginable speeds. Within those waves are the elements it has forged: iron, silicon, carbon, and oxygen. The shockwave becomes a stellar wind, stretching beyond the bounds of the star's former home, expanding into interstellar space. It carries with it the ingredients for future worlds. The void does not swallow it, it receives it. This wind does not howl, it does not bend trees or lift dust. It passes through the dark without resistance, without sound, but it changes what it touches. When it reaches nearby gas clouds, it stirs them. It compresses the hydrogen there, igniting the slow birth of new stars. These stars in turn begin the process again, gathering mass, igniting fusion, and eventually releasing their own winds. The oxygen caught in these flows is not random. It is shaped by fusion's rhythm, by the layered choreography of nuclear reactions. It is formed deep inside stellar cores, and only in death is it released. Between the stars lies space that seems empty but is filled with this motion. Clouds of gas and dust, some thick, some barely there, float quietly, shaped by these unseen winds. Over time, they collect material like the air collects snow until they become heavy enough to collapse inward. The winds do not stop them. They help them, They push just enough. They guide the process like a soft hand pressing down. And through this gentle shaping, new generations of stars and planets are born. The winds are not storms, they are invitations. They bring the past into the present, offering the universe another chance to build. Oxygen is always part of that offering. It bonds with hydrogen to form water. It blends into silicate minerals that form rocks. It drifts in icy rings, in comet tails, in thin halos of planetary atmospheres. It touches everything. The most remarkable winds come from galaxies themselves. As billions of stars live and die, their combined energy begins to push outward. The entire galaxy seems to exhale, sending material beyond its edges into the space between galaxies. These outflows stretch for hundreds of thousands of light years, and the oxygen they carry doesn't vanish. It crosses the void. It becomes part of the vast web of matter that connects the universe. This web, invisible to our eyes, stretches like a lattice across space, threading galaxies together with delicate filaments of gas and gravity. These filaments are not empty. They hold the echoes of stars long gone, and in those echoes, oxygen remains, a quiet trace of life's potential drifting far from where it was born. Scientists have detected it by watching how light from distant quasars dims as it passes through. The pattern of that dimming reveals what lies between us and them, and often the fingerprints of oxygen appear, thin, widespread, constant. So now we know oxygen does not stay still. It is restless. It leaves stars, rides winds, crosses the void. It spreads not in chaos but in quiet precision. It follows the same laws that guide light and gravity, and over time it finds its way into everything, from the stones beneath our feet to the breath in our lungs. This is how life begins, not all at once but through a long unfolding. The wind that crossed the void did not come here to give us breath. It came because that is what the universe does. It moves, it shares. It does not hoard its beauty or its building blocks. It sends them outward, trusting that somewhere they will find a place to grow. And so the oxygen that crossed the void is not just an atom. It is a gift, a legacy. It is the soft echo of stars that burned long before Earth turned. It reminds us that everything we are has been in motion for billions of years, that our breath is older than our planet, that our lungs are filled with wind from other worlds. Let's move deeper into the journey of this cosmic wind, a journey shaped not by speed or destination but by patience. The wind that carries oxygen does not rush, it does not seek. It simply flows, shaped by the structure of space itself. Between galaxies, the void is vast but not barren. In this silence, in this slow stretch of matter and light, the wind continues, threading through dark filaments, seeping into halos, whispering against the outlines of growing galaxies. Every atom it carries is a relic of something older. Every molecule is a messenger, crossing epochs with its quiet presence. The oxygen in this wind may drift for hundreds of millions of years before it meets resistance. Along the way, it passes through faint rivers of gas, intergalactic streams that act as cosmic highways, channeling matter from one place to another. These filaments are fragile, nearly invisible, but they form the hidden skeleton of the universe. Galaxies gather along their spines, stars cluster at their intersections, and through them the wind moves, seeding space with the ingredients for life. Sometimes the wind slows. It brushes against clouds of hydrogen, cooling and condensing. At other times it gains momentum, stirred by the blast of a nearby supernova or the pull of a galactic collision. And each time it shifts, it carries more than matter. It carries history. The oxygen atoms may have come from different stars, from different times, from different regions of space. But now they are together, blended into the soft motion of the universe's breath, riding a current that has no shore. And here in these currents, something astonishing happens. When enough matter gathers in one place, drawn together by gravity, a new galaxy begins to form. Slowly, gas collects and spins, growing denser, brighter, stars ignite, light returns. And once again, the cycle continues. The wind becomes part of this growth. The oxygen it carried settles into newborn stars, into the disks of planets not yet cooled, into the icy edges of comets destined to wander. The void, once quiet, becomes filled with potential. This is how the universe grows, not in eruptions but in spirals, not in chaos but in movement. And the wind that crosses the void is its gentle architect. It spreads complexity like pollen, with no plan but with endless possibility. The oxygen it carries is used again and again, transformed by heat, by chemistry, by time. It may be broken apart, recombined, lost, found, but it is never wasted. And sometimes, long after its journey began, this oxygen finds a planet. One with oceans, with weather, with life. It becomes part of a breath, a heartbeat, a thought. The same wind that once drifted in silence now lives in motion, in awareness. It becomes the reason wings can lift, the reason fire can glow, the reason forests can rise. And though that transformation seems magical, it is simply the end of a very long journey, one that began with the death of a star and a gust of elemental wind. This wind also leaves behind clues. Astronomers map it using light from faraway galaxies, studying how it shifts and dims as it passes through clouds rich with oxygen. These observations reveal not only where the wind has been, but where it is going. They show us that galaxies breathe not only in as they gather material, but out as they share what they've made. This outward flow is not loss, it is generosity. A galaxy that exhales spreads its richness across the cosmos, feeding the space between. And as more galaxies form, more winds rise. Some escape entirely, moving freely through intergalactic space. Others become trapped in halos, circling like eddies in a stream, and each wind, no matter how faint, adds to the collective breath of the universe. Together they form a rhythm, a pulse measured not in seconds but in billions of years. Inhale, exhale, gather, give. And you, breathing now on a planet warmed by sunlight and cooled by night, are part of that rhythm. The oxygen in your body came from these winds. It did not fall suddenly. It arrived slowly over vast distances across eons. It crossed the void not to find you, but because that is what the universe does. It moves toward ants toward sharing, toward the creation of what is needed long before it is used. So the wind that crossed the void is not past. It is present. It moves through your lungs as you read these words. It stirs in the leaves outside your window. It rests in the frost on mountaintops, in the salt of the oceans, in the breath of sleeping animals. It is here, always moving, always quiet, always part of the same cycle that began before light had a name. And in knowing this, we are changed. We no longer see ourselves as apart from the stars. We see ourselves as their continuation. The wind that crossed the void did not stop at the edge of our galaxy. It came here, it found a place to rest. And now it moves through us, carrying the memory of distant suns, of ancient silences, of journeys older than time. Now let us follow that wind one last time, tracing its soft path as it moves not just through space, but through meaning. For the wind that crossed the void has become more than motion. It has become memory, rhythm, and connection. It carries the breath of stars, yes, but also the quiet truth that nothing is ever truly alone. In the wide silence between galaxies, the wind reminds us that every particle belongs, that every journey has its place. That even the smallest atom, drifting weightless in the dark, carries within it the past, the present, and the promise of becoming. As it enters a galaxy, the wind slows, gravity catches it, temperature rises. The atoms it carries, including oxygen, begin to interact. Some will spiral into young star-forming regions, collapsing into dense clouds and igniting the first flickers of fusion. Others will settle into planetary disks, where rocks and ices cling together to form new worlds. And some, barely touched, will remain in halos, circling in long arcs for millions of years before finally falling inward. In each of these paths, the oxygen begins a new chapter, no longer just a traveler, but now a participant in formation. Consider a planet just formed. Its surface is hot, its sky thick with vapor. The oxygen here is bound tightly in minerals, in molten rock, in simple molecules not yet part of air. And yet it waits. Over time, volcanism stirs it upward. Water forms, lightning dances, the planet cools, and slowly life appears, not all at once, not with grand design, but with slow persistence. Microbes emerge, photosynthesis begins, and oxygen, once locked in stone, is released into the air. A new kind of wind begins, the wind of breath. That same oxygen, now free, rises through atmosphere and cloud, cycles through rain and root, flame and flesh. It becomes part of animals, of forests, of oceans. It fuels motion, metabolism, memory. It binds with carbon to be released again. It slips through gills and wings and leaves. And through it all it carries the same origin, a wind that crossed the void, a legacy of stars, given freely, now flowing through life. And one day that oxygen returns, not to its original form but to the wider cycle. When life ends, when decay begins, when fire consumes or stillness takes hold, oxygen is released again, not lost, not diminished, but made ready for another journey. This is how the universe keeps its breath, by sharing it, by moving it, by never letting it rest too long in any one place. Even here on Earth, the air we breathe today contains atoms exhaled by trees hundreds of years ago, by animals long forgotten, by ancestors who lived under different skies. The wind moves through time as well as space. And as we look outward with instruments that can read the faintest shadows in light, we are beginning to see this wind more clearly. We are mapping the flow of oxygen through galaxies, through halos, through the spaces between. We are learning to see not just stars, but the invisible scaffolding of the cosmos, the soft fabric woven by winds that never stop. This fabric is not made of dust alone. It is made of sharing, of return, of the patient, endless circulation of elements. Even black holes, those regions where gravity reigns so strongly that not even light escapes, play a role in shaping this wind. As gas falls toward them, some is swallowed, but much is heated and flung outward. Powerful jets carry particles far beyond the host galaxy's edge. These outflows, fierce and luminous, help drive oxygen into the void, ensuring that even the densest regions do not hoard their materials. In this way, even collapse becomes release. Even stillness becomes motion. So what does it mean, then, that we are part of this? That the wind which crossed the void now lives within us? It means that the boundaries we imagine, between stars and life, between here and there, between breath and stone, are softer than they seem. We are not simply inhabitants of the universe. We are shaped by its breath. Every breath we take is a participation in something larger, older, and endlessly ongoing. And in that knowing there is peace, because it means we are never true. Lie separate, the wind that crossed the void connects us to places we'll never see, to times long before our own, to stars that once shone and now are gone. It connects us to the rhythm of giving and receiving, of arriving and returning, that defines everything the universe creates. So lie still now, feel your breath, feel how easily it moves, how softly it enters and leaves. It has traveled far to reach you, not in distance but in time, and though it stays for only a moment, it will move on again, part of a cycle you were born into and will always belong to. The wind that crossed the void has touched stars, dust, clouds, planets, and now your lungs. It is not done. It will continue, long after we are gone, whispering through space, carrying what is needed, finding what is possible. In the end, we are not just breathing. We are being breathed by the universe itself. Before there was breath, before stars had hearts and galaxies had arms, the universe was a smooth, quiet heat. There were no planets, no winds, no directions. Only light, stretched and free, moving evenly through a young, expanding space. In this earliest moment, nothing breathed, nothing pulsed. But hidden inside this gentle monotony were the seeds of rhythm. The faintest variations in temperature and density, imperceptible, scattered like soft ripples, would one day become the structure of everything. The universe, still newborn, was preparing to take its first breath. It began with gravity, soft and persistent, drawing matter inward. Hydrogen and helium, the simplest of all elements, gathered like mist into pockets of density. These clouds began to spin, to press inward, to warm. The first stars were forming. In their centers, the immense pressure sparked fusion, and in that reaction, the first light was born, not just leftover light from the Big Bang, but new light, starlight. The universe flickered awake. These stars lived fast. Massive and hot, they burned their fuel quickly, fusing hydrogen into helium, then into carbon, nitrogen, and eventually oxygen. This fusion was the beginning of breath, not in lungs or air, but in potential. These were the elements that would someday make life possible. The universe was still too young to know what breath would mean, but it was learning how to create the materials it would need. And when those stars died, they did not go quietly. They exploded, sending their insides across the darkness in bursts of energy. These explosions, called supernovae, were the first exhalations. They pushed oxygen, carbon, and other heavy elements into the space around them, spreading complexity where once there was only simplicity. The universe, in these moments, began to breathe, not with air, but with creation. From these beginnings, a rhythm emerged. New stars formed in the wreckage of the old. Their gravity gathered the dispersed materials, and fusion began again. With each cycle, more oxygen appeared, more matter was stirred, more of the universe became capable of building. What was once silent and smooth was now textured, layered, filled with motion. The first breath had become a pattern. This pattern echoed outward, shaping galaxies. Some galaxies pulled gas into spinning disks, flattening into spirals where stars could form in waves. Others collided and merged, their contents thrown into chaos, only to settle again into new shapes. And always the stars within them breathed. They took in gas, turned it into light and elements, and returned it to space. This was not breath as we know it, but it was breath nonetheless, a steady rhythm of intake and release, growth and surrender. Oxygen was at the center of this rhythm, not just because it was common, but because of what it allowed. It bonded easily, forming molecules that could store energy, that could shape temperature and chemistry. It was essential to water, to rock, to life. And though life had not yet emerged, the conditions were forming. The universe was not rushing. It was learning gently with every breath. Now imagine a galaxy, billions of years ago, glowing faintly in the young sky. Its stars flicker and fade. Some send out winds strong enough to escape the galaxy's pull, carrying oxygen into the dark beyond. Others hold their breath a little longer, their fusion slow and steady, adding new layers of light. Around them, gas flows inward, stirred by gravity and time. The galaxy is not a finished shape. It is a lung, slowly expanding and contracting, learning how to balance creation and release. These galactic lungs were not just building stars. They were building complexity. The oxygen they spread into the cosmos mixed with hydrogen to form water, with silicon to form stone, with carbon to form organic chains. These combinations, scattered and stirred by gravity, drifted into new systems, into the disks that would someday become planets. The universe's breath had become structure. Still, there were no eyes to see this, no voices to name it, but the process continued. The breathing of the universe grew more intricate, gas cooled and clumped. Planets formed around stars. Some of those planets had the right balance of ingredients: water, warmth, stability. And on one such planet, tucked inside a young spiral galaxy, oxygen found a new role. It entered biology. This shift did not happen all at once. For billions of years, Earth was quiet. But as life began to stir, oxygen took on a new rhythm. It was released by microbes, then by plants, then by entire ecosystems. It moved from rocks into air, from oceans into sky. And finally, it became breath in the way we know it: soft, invisible, essential. But this was only the latest verse in a much older song. The universe had been learning to breathe long before lungs existed. It had been practicing through fusion and flame, through dust and wind, through the rise and fall of stars. And now, in every breath we take, that ancient rhythm continues, not just in biology, but in memory. We do not breathe alone. Our inhale is connected to the winds that shaped galaxies, to the oxygen that drifted across interstellar space, to the stars that burned and gave their contents away. The universe's breath lives in us now, quietly repeating the same pattern it began so long ago. In, out, fusion, release. Stillness, stirring, light, silence. And again. Let us drift further now, through the deeper rhythms of cosmic breath. The universe, having learned the art of creation through the life and death of stars, began to exhale more generously. It was no longer just forming elements like oxygen in isolation. It was shaping entire environments where those elements could interact, compound, and evolve. In the gentle dance between gravity and pressure, galaxies blossomed. And within their arms, in the soft glow of starlight, the universe began to repeat the breath it had discovered: gather, transform, release. This breath echoed not only in the stars, but in the matter between them. The interstellar medium, once quiet and simple, became rich with chemistry. Clouds of gas cooled and thickened, enriched by generations of dead stars. The oxygen within these clouds bonded with carbon, hydrogen, and nitrogen to form the first complex molecules that would one day be called precursors to life. This was not life yet. It was still chemistry, but it was chemistry with memory. Each molecule carried the fingerprint of the processes that shaped it. Each atom, a relic of distant explosions and long quiet fusion. Even in the coldest parts of space, regions too far from stars to feel their warmth, oxygen continued its quiet work. It froze into icy grains, clung to the surface of dust particles, nested inside comet hearts. These frozen fragments would one day be flung toward new worlds, melting into oceans or slipping into the atmospheres of planets still in their infancy. The breath of the universe had found a new texture: ice, vapor, fluid motion waiting to be stirred by heat. And stir it did. On Earth, and likely on other worlds, oxygen became a turning point. In Earth's earliest oceans, the first photosynthetic microbes began to release oxygen as a byproduct of sunlight and carbon dioxide. At first, the oxygen had nowhere to go. It bonded with iron in the oceans, staining the rocks rust red. But eventually, the iron was saturated, and oxygen began to escape into the atmosphere. Slowly, invisibly, breath took on new form. Not just a reaction, but an environment. The air itself was changing, and with it, the potential for more complex life was awakening. This change was not easy. It caused extinctions, upheaval, reshaping. Many early life forms could not survive the new oxygen-rich conditions. But from this dramatic shift came new possibilities. With oxygen came energy. Cells could generate more power, evolve into more complex forms, build tissues, organs, and movement. Oxygen was not just breath now, it was transformation. It enabled new forms of awareness. It powered thought. It made memory possible. And all of it still followed the ancient rhythm the universe had started. Take in, change, release. From stars to cells, the pattern held. The breath that began as fusion inside a dying star was now the breath of a living being. And it did not end there. That breath was exhaled again, into the air, into the trees, into the sky, where it would be used again by another life, and another, and another. In this way, oxygen became more than an element. It became a thread, a continuous, unbroken story of connection. It passed from star to wine to rock to water to blood. It crossed galaxies and generations. It outlived the forms it touched. And yet, in every one, it helped create something new. Even now, on planets far from Earth, that same process may be unfolding. Scientists search the atmospheres of distant worlds for signs of oxygen. not because oxygen proves life, but because it suggests the conditions that make life more likely. It suggests a planet where light and chemistry are in balance, where reactions are slow enough to be stable, but fast enough to build. It suggests a world learning, as our own once did, how to breathe. And if that's true, if other planets are reaching this stage, then the breath of the universe has become something even more beautiful. Not just a cycle, but a chorus. Not just one planet pulsing with breath, but many, each finding its rhythm, its moment, its voice. We may never hear those voices. They may be too far, too faint, too different. But the fact that we can imagine them at all is because we carry the same rhythm within us. Our very ability to wonder, to reflect, to seek patterns across the sky is born of breath, the breath of our bodies and the breath of the stars. So the question becomes, was this always the goal? Was the universe from the very beginning reaching toward this pattern, toward breath, toward life, toward self-awareness? Perhaps not. Perhaps there was no intention, only possibility, only motion. But the pattern remains unmistakable in its grace. Stars exhale, galaxies share, atoms drift, planets form, life awakens, and breath, always breath, returns again. The universe did not learn to breathe in one moment. It learned slowly, gently, with each new cycle. It practiced through heat and pressure, through collapse and bloom. And in us, the lesson continues. Every inhale echoes a process begun billions of years ago. Every exhale offers a return to that endless exchange. We are not merely shaped by oxygen. We are sustained by its journey. We are living proof that the breath of the universe is not lost in space. It is alive in time, in thought, in motion. And it will continue long after we are gone, traveling once more through dust, through light, through silence, looking for its next place to become something more. Now let us arrive gently at the final chapter of this unfolding breath, the moment when awareness returns to where it came from, and the story of oxygen becomes not just a tale of matter, but of meaning. For in every breath we take, the universe listens to itself. The inhale is not only air, it is memory, motion, time folded into substance. And the exhale is not only release, it is return. The universe learned to breathe not because it needed to, but because it could. And through that possibility, something wondrous emerged. Across time, the act of breathing has transformed. What began as fusion in the hearts of stars became chemistry in drifting clouds, then metabolism in single-celled organisms, then the breath of forests, of mammals, of oceans. But even now it remains the same at its core. Each breath takes in what was made by stars. Each breath gives back what can be used again. The body is not separate from this rhythm. It is an instrument for it. And so, as we live, we play our part in a cycle far older than the earth itself. The breath that sustains us is not ours alone. It belonged to countless others before us, animals, trees, rivers, fires. It belonged to volcanoes and waves, to comets and clouds. And long before that, it belonged to stars. Stars that burned brightly, lived briefly, and scattered their contents so that others might one day rise. That we exist at all is not the result of a single moment, but of a continuous generosity, the willingness of the universe to give, again and again, from what it once held close. The universe learned to breathe through destruction. Each collapse gave rise to something new, and through that process it found balance. It found a way to create complexity without losing harmony. The oxygen that enables life is also the same that feeds fire. It gives and takes with equal grace. It is the element of change, of motion, of cycles, and it moves with such quiet certainty that we forget to notice it, even as it sustains us. But if we listen carefully, we can hear its story. It is in the rustle of leaves, in the whisper of waves, in the rise and fall of our own chests as we sleep. It is in the silence after laughter, in the pause before words. It moves through every living thing, linking them not just through biology but through shared inheritance. We are not made of stardust by poetry alone. We are made of it because the stars taught the universe how to breathe, and we are the latest breath in that long exhale. And when our time ends, we do not disappear. The breath continues. The atoms that formed our lungs, our thoughts, our voices will return to the air, the soil, the sea. They will be carried by wind, consumed by roots, dissolved into rain. And slowly, gently, they will become part of another life, another breath. Nothing is lost, everything moves. This is the quiet triumph of oxygen. It does not remain still. It transforms. It becomes flame, ice, wind, blood. It becomes voice, memory, the warmth of skin. It becomes part of every story without needing to be seen. It gives without asking. It builds without claiming. And in doing so, it teaches us something essential, that the most important forces are often the most invisible. We do not need to travel to distant galaxies to touch this truth. It is here, in the breath you are taking now. It is in the invisible rhythm that began with the birth of light and still continues, unbroken. The universe breathes through us, and in our awareness of it, it hears itself more clearly. Perhaps this is what it was always reaching for, not a final shape, but a steady pattern. A way to be both vast and intimate, ancient and immediate. Through the breath of galaxies, it shaped the breath of life. Through the fire of stars, it created the softness of lungs. And through all of it, it learned to give again and again, until something arose that could recognize the gift. So breathe slowly, let the air move in, then out, and know that in this simple act you are participating in the oldest story ever told. A story without words, carried by motion, shaped by time. A story that began when the first particles gathered, when the first stars formed, when the first winds stirred. You are not separate from this story, you are a chapter of it, a verse, a pause in the rhythm, a soft place where the breath of the universe became a whisper, and that whisper became a thought, and that thought became you. The universe learned to breathe. And in doing so, it made room for you to do the same. In the quiet spaces between stars, where light travels without sound and distance stretches beyond imagination, tiny particles drift like seeds on an eternal wind. They are not loud, they do not glow, they do not call attention to themselves, but they move softly, patiently through the dark, carrying with them stories older than planets, older than time as we measure it. Among them, oxygen lingers not as breath or flame, but as potential, as a whisper woven into the silence. These are the silent particles, the quiet carriers of what may one day become life. Long before they joined lungs or waves or clouds, these particles floated unnoticed. They passed through interstellar gas, grazed the edges of galactic halos, and slipped into the gravitational arms of forming systems. They were small single atoms, dust grains, molecules no larger than the width of a thought, and yet within them was everything. Carbon, nitrogen, oxygen, not arranged, not alive, but waiting. The ingredients of life spread wide, too thin to see, too quiet to hear, but always present. The universe is not made of grand events alone. It is shaped, perhaps more deeply, by the things that go unnoticed. The particles that take centuries to cross the space between stars. The molecules that survive the heat of a supernova and still find their way into a planet's crust. These small presences move without urgency. They obey gravity, temperature, magnetism, but they move with a kind of grace, flowing through the fabric of space like threads drawn through cloth. And wherever they pass, they leave the possibility of something more. Scientists detect them not by touching, but by listening. Telescopes tuned to the quietest parts of the spectrum can pick up faint signals, slight dimmings, tiny shifts in the light from distant stars. These shifts tell us what lies in the way: a cloud of gas, a pocket of dust, a cluster of molecules that once belonged to a long-dead star. And within those clouds, the signs of oxygen emerge, not loudly but with certainty. A slight change in frequency, a subtle absorption line. A whisper across the void. We tend to think of the universe as empty, but it is not. Even the darkest parts are filled with motion, with dust, with fragments. Each piece is a record, a leftover, a messenger. The silent particles do not forget. They carry with them the memory of every fusion reaction, every explosion, every collapse. And among them, oxygen moves quietly, shaped by nothing more than the laws of motion, yet destined to become the breath of a world. In this silence, everything depends on time. Not time as a ticking clock, but time as a stretch, a swell, a softness. 1 billion years to drift across a galaxy, another billion to settle into a gas cloud, another million to be caught in a disk of forming matter. These are not delays, they are the rhythm of patience. The universe does not rush, and in that stillness it creates. Now imagine a single particle of oxygen, ejected from a star's death long ago. It drifts for eons, passing through vast spaces so quiet they seem not to exist at all. Along the way it is joined by others, carbon, hydrogen, tiny specks of ice and dust. Together they form a cloud, and within that cloud gravity begins its work again. The particles draw close, they spin, they warm, and eventually a star is born, and around that star a disk of dust and gas flattens and thickens. From this, planets emerge. On one of those planets, oceans may form, rain may fall, and the oxygen that once floated unseen now dissolves into water, fills the sky. Weaves into stone, later still it may enter a cell, then a body, then a breath. And the whisper it carried all this way, of fire, of motion, of becoming, is finally heard. This is the path of silent particles. They do not demand, they do not shine, but they carry the deepest truths of the universe, that everything changes, that nothing is truly lost, that even in stillness there is preparation. The most distant whispers are not echoes of nothing, they are songs waiting to be sung. And the most beautiful part, it happens everywhere, not just here, not just once. Across the universe, these particles are drifting still, forming clouds, feeding stars, shaping what will come next. We detect their traces in galaxies billions of light years away. We see them in the faint glow of hydrogen clouds, in the scattered light of quasars, in the outlines of things not yet formed, and in every one oxygen waits, not impatiently, not purposefully, simply present. It is enough to know that these whispers are everywhere. It is enough to listen, to tune our instruments, yes, but also our imaginations, to remember that silence is not absence, it is potential. It is the soft breath between notes, the still moment before creation begins. The particles continue to move, and their quiet journey is not yet done. Let us follow those quiet travelers now, deeper into their journey, into the hidden spaces where particles become patterns. These fragments, too small to see, drift through a universe shaped not by noise but by order. They do not fight the currents. They move with them, tracing invisible maps laid down by gravity and time, and in doing so they begin to gather, slowly, gently, without alarm. What once was scattered begins to form. From dust a cloud, from cloud a spiral, from spiral a world. And all the while the oxygen flows, not with urgency but with knowing. It has made this journey before. These gatherings are not sudden. They unfold over millions of years. What begins as a diffuse mist of particles, barely more than thought, becomes dense with potential. Gravity brings them close, chemistry makes them hold, and heat begins to rise. From this, stars ignite. The silent particles are drawn into orbits, into disks, into turbulence that shapes and reshapes them until they find rest in something larger. They do not resist, they allow. And through that allowance, they become part of something entirely new. In these dense regions where stars are born and light begins to flicker, oxygen finds its voice. It bonds, it cools, it warms, it weaves itself into water and minerals, into molecules that spiral toward complexity. These molecules are not yet alive, but they are no longer simple. They can fold, they can store, they can react. The beginnings of biology shimmer faintly in their structures, traces of future breath held in silence. Some particles will fall into stars and be consumed in fusion. Others will cling to icy rocks and drift toward the outer edges of forming systems. Some will enter atmospheres and vanish. Others will settle in oceans or rivers or soil. Each one carries its past with it, the memory of stars, of distance, of long motion through the void, and none of them are wasted. Even those that disappear from view continue the work of shaping. And still the whispers continue. Scientists peering through space telescopes listen for the echoes. They study the spectra of galaxies, watching for patterns in light that reveal the chemistry of far-off clouds. They send probes through the solar system, scooping dust from comets, reading the fingerprints of formation. In every sample, every light curve, they find traces of what came before, of oxygen, carbon, iron, of silence patiently made solid. It is in this silence that the deepest formation occurs, not in the violence of explosions, but in the long, quiet passage through time. The particles change slowly. They settle, they cool, they wait. And when the moment comes, when conditions are just right, they become more. A world forms, a sea gathers, an atmosphere holds, breath becomes possible. And when life does emerge, it does so not as an interruption, but as a continuation. The particles do not reject life, they support it. The oxygen that once floated alone in deep space now moves through veins, through roots, through clouds. It is not surprised by this. It was always capable of it. It only needed the right conditions, the right warmth, the right pause. Even now on Earth, that process continues. Silent particles drift through our atmosphere, fall from space, collect in soil and sea. Some are older than the planet itself. Others are new, formed in the wake of more recent events, but all carry the same story, a story of motion without noise, of presence without praise, a story that tells us the universe does not need grandeur to create, it only needs time. And we who breathe, who move, who wonder, we are not separate from this story. We are made of the sea particles. Every atom in our body was once scattered, quiet, unformed. Every molecule of oxygen we draw in has crossed distances we cannot imagine, has waited longer than history, has held itself ready for this. That is why stillness matters. That is why quiet is sacred, because it is in the quiet that formation happens. In the silence, particles drift together. In the darkness, bonds are made. In the absence of urgency, something lasting begins. The distant whispers that move through the universe are not just soundless, they are sacred. They are the first breath before the first voice. And when we search the skies for signs of life, we are really listening for this whisper, for the presence of chemistry where we least expect it, for the silent fingerprints of elements that have traveled farther than light. And when we find them, when oxygen appears in the atmosphere of a distant planet, when water glints on a rocky moon, we know what it means. Not that life is there necessarily, but that it could be, that the ingredients have arrived, that the silence has spoken. These distant whispers do not fade, they accumulate. They become the fabric of everything we touch, everything we are. They remind us that complexity is born not from chaos, but from quiet cooperation, from the agreement of particles to stay, to connect, to become. So the next time you close your eyes and feel your breath pause, and know that you are part of that same whisper, that the oxygen you hold was once silent, drifting in the dark, that it waited not for you but for this moment, and that now in you it has found form. The silent particles are still moving, and their whispers still shape the world. Now let us listen once more gently to the last part of their journey, the long arc of silent particles becoming presence. What began as fragments drifting between stars has become something whole, something seen, something felt. The quiet has not ended, it has simply changed form. What once whispered in the dark now moves in breath, in waves, in thoughts, but it is still quiet. The silence is not broken, it is carried forward. It lives in every inhale and every word unspoken. These particles, long separated, have become something together, and that something is us. It is easy to overlook this. We are surrounded by noise, by brightness, by urgency. But beneath all of it, the universe is still speaking in whispers. The oxygen in our blood is a sentence written by stars. The dust beneath our feet is a letter from a comet. The calcium in our bones is a message left by a supernova, and each of these messages was sent not in haste but in stillness, not by shouting but by enduring. The particles never rushed, they only moved where time allowed. And now that they have become part of us, we too are messengers. Our bodies are arrangements of silence made solid. Our thoughts are the consequence of atoms that once floated through empty space. The pulse in our chest is the rhythm of distant forces now translated into life. We are not apart from the whispers, we are their voice. What does it mean to be shaped by silence? It means that the greatest parts of us are built on patience. That what allows us to live, to feel, to speak was formed not in chaos but in deep time. That we are the result of agreements made between particles long before the earth took shape. And those agreements continue. The carbon we exhale will feed trees. The water we drink will return to oceans. The oxygen we use will find its way into another life. We do not end the story, we continue it. Even when our lives are over, the particles remain. They return to the soil, the sea, the wind. They resume their wandering, no longer shaped by our breath, but carrying the memory of it. And in time they will become part of something else, another tree, another voice, another spark. The universe wastes nothing. It listens, it waits, it reuses every whisper. This is why silence is not emptiness. It is fullness waiting to unfold. It is a room before music, a sky before sunrise. The spaces between stars are not voids, they are preparations. They hold the ingredients, the instructions, the breath before breath. The particles that drift there are not lost. They are learning where to land. And when they do, when they settle, when they bond, when they form something lasting, they do so because of everything they have carried. The journey becomes the foundation. The whisper becomes a word. The silence becomes a heartbeat. Our role in this story is not to rush it. It is to witness it, to honor the quiet from which we came, to recognize that our most essential parts are not the loudest. It is not the noise that gives us life. It is the invisible patterns, the subtle currents, the atoms that waited across time for this very moment. They did not choose us. They were simply ready. And now, having found a place, they breathe through us. They remember, they repeat, they move. We are not the end of the journey. We are a resting point along the way. And just as we were made, we will one day be remade, not into nothing, but into something new. The particles will go on. Their whispers will continue. So when you lie awake beneath the stars or close your eyes in stillness, remember this. The space between things is not empty. It is filled with everything that ever mattered waiting to become again. The quiet is not the absence of life. It is its preparation. You are not alone in your breaths. You are surrounded by the same particles that once floated through galaxies, that once listened to the silence of the early universe, that now rest gently within you. The silent particles remain. The distant whispers do not fade. They are still moving, still becoming, still here. Long before Earth turned, before oceans waved or trees rose into sky, there was a moment so small and so profound that it echoed into everything that came after. The universe had cooled enough. Light had separated from matter. Gravity was gathering clouds of hydrogen in the deep dark, and in a quiet corner of this new cosmos something flickered. A star, then another, and another. In these first fires, deep in the black stillness, the elements of breath began to form, not as air, not yet, but as building blocks. Carbon, nitrogen, and oxygen emerged like shy notes in the first song ever sung. It was not life, but it was its beginning. The first breath of everything began with fusion. Inside those stars, hydrogen fused into helium and helium into heavier things. Layer by layer, the cores burned hotter, deeper, more complex. And at the center of that work was oxygen, simple, essential, ready to bond, ready to build. It did not move yet. It remained confined to the hearts of suns. But its presence was real and it was rising. With every generation of stars that lived and died, more oxygen was scattered into space, first in small amounts, then in wide waves. It rode out on solar winds, was thrown in supernovae, and drifted in the quiet space between galaxies. The universe at this point was still mostly silent. No lungs had ever drawn air, no creature had ever breathed, but the ingredients were everywhere. The stars had created them, the winds had spread them, the clouds had begun to collect them. The first breath of everything was not an inhale, it was a gathering. Imagine those clouds now, rich with dust and elemental ash. In them molecules formed, water, carbon dioxide, simple chains of carbon and hydrogen. In the darkness, lightning sparked, gravity pressed inward, temperature rose, disks of gas flattened around infant stars, and in the folds of those disks planets began to form, cores of rock and ice and metal wrapped in vapor waiting to cool. Among the swirling chaos, oxygen settled once more, in the stones, in the water, in the sky. On some of those planets, nothing more happened. The air escaped, the heat remained, the chemistry never quite clicked, but on others, on a few, everything aligned. One of those was Earth, a young planet spinning fast, wrapped in a thin veil of gases, bombarded by comets and sunlight. Its oceans formed from vapor and ice, its crust cooled from lava and ash, and its sky was thick with carbon and steam. But even then, oxygen was there, trapped in rocks, dissolved in oceans, waiting. It would take billions of years before that oxygen was free. Before it rose into the atmosphere, before it filled the lungs of animals, before it supported fire and breath and voice. But its path had already begun. Microbes appeared, simple and small, feeding on sunlight and carbon, and as they lived, they changed the world. Slowly, they released oxygen as waste, the oceans rusted, the rocks turned red, and the sky began to hold a new kind of air. This was not yet breath in the way we know it, but it was close. The world was preparing. The first breath of everything was becoming more than chemistry, it was becoming an environment. A place where life could grow more complex, where cells could cooperate, where organisms could form tissues, then movement, then thought. And still, oxygen was at the heart of it, always quiet, always essential. It moved from sea to sky, from stone to root, from fire to air. It enabled reactions that gave energy to life. It fueled the growth of forests, the motion of wings, the spark of neurons. And in time, it entered lungs, not as something new, but as something ancient, finally finding its moment. When the first creature inhaled oxygen into lungs designed to use it, the circle closed. The long journey from stars to cells found its rhythm. That breath, gentle, instinctive, unseen, was the fulfillment of billions of years of fusion and drift. The first breath of everything had become a breath of someone. And that someone became many. Creatures spread across land and sea. They filled the air with sound, the ground with movement. They breathed not just to survive, but to explore, to earn, to remember. Each breath carried the memory of all that came before, of stars that died to make oxygen, of winds that spread it, of microbes that released it, of forests that purified it. Now we breathe without thinking, we draw air into our lungs and let it go, but inside that motion is everything. The first breath did not happen on Earth, it happened in the cores of the first stars. What we do now is only a continuation, a gentle participation in the oldest story the universe has ever told. The first breath of everything is not a single moment, it is a thread. It stretches from the beginning of time to the quiet rise and fall of your own chest. It connects galaxies and forests, stars and blood, and it is still moving, still forming, still becoming. Let us drift deeper into that first breath, into the long, patient unfolding of a world learning how to hold life. The oxygen was present, but not yet in the open air. It remained bound in rocks, trapped in water, hidden in the hearts of minerals. The earth exhaled steam and gas from volcanic mouths, and the sky thickened with heat. Life was still soft, barely visible, barely distinct, but it stirred. In the oceans, where light met water, simple cells began to arrange themselves. Some of these cyanobacteria learned a new trick, to eat light and exhale something unseen. That something was oxygen. At first, it changed nothing. The oxygen disappeared into iron, rusting it into red beds that painted the seabed. It dissolved into water, filling it slowly. It took millions of years for it to reach the sky, but eventually it did, and when it did, the world changed. What had been a place of shadows and heat became a world of air. The first breath of everything was no longer hidden. It shimmered in the sky, it whispered through waves, it made space for what came next. With oxygen in the air, the rules changed. Life, once bound to low-energy reactions, now had fuel. Cells could grow more complex. They could build organelles. They could move, sense, adapt. Multicellular life appeared first as soft-bodied shapes in the sea, then as creatures with bones, with mouths, with eyes. The oceans teemed, the land stirred, green reached upward, and animals followed. The breath that oxygen enabled was not just chemical. It was kinetic. It allowed for motion, for endurance, for expansion. Muscles could contract, wings could beat, brains could fire. The world began to fill with motion and sound, flocks, herds, voices, storms, and all of it ran on oxygen. It entered lungs and left as carbon dioxide, feeding the plants. It entered leaves and left as sugar, feeding the animals. The cycle was perfect. It did not waste. It did not pause. And so, breath became the heartbeat of ecosystems. Rainforests exchanged oxygen with the atmosphere. Coral reefs hummed with photosynthetic light. Deserts held hardy shrubs that exhaled softly under sun and wind. Everywhere the rhythm continued, oxygen flowing in, carbon flowing out, life adjusting to its own echo. Some creatures mastered breath more deeply. Birds evolved lungs that could absorb oxygen on both inhale and exhale. Mammals developed diaphragms that pulled air in with ease. Whales held it for hours beneath the sea. And humans eventually learned not just to breathe, but to listen, to feel breath as more than survival, as connection. Meditation, song, language, sigh. These were all gifts born from that same cycle. And as humanity grew, we too changed the air. We burned forests, releasing stored carbon. We mined ancient peat, oil, and coal. Fossil breath turned solid. And in burning it, we thickened the sky again, not with the steam of early Earth, but with our own exhaust. The oxygen remained, but the balance trembled. Still, the breath continues. Despite imbalance, despite change, the rhythm endures. Trees still grow. Oceans still exchange. The atmosphere, though altered, still holds space for breath. And the oxygen within it still comes from the same source, light on leaves, microbes in water, the quiet work of photosynthesis. The first breath of everything never stopped, it only changed shape. What's most beautiful is that we carry this breath in every cell. Our mitochondria, the engines of our cells, are descended from ancient bacteria that once swam freely, inhaling oxygen and using it to fuel their tiny lives. Long ago they joined with larger cells. They stayed, they helped, and now they are part of us. Every beat of your heart, every blink, every thought is powered by oxygen processed by these ancient partners. You are not just breathing. You are continuing a collaboration that began billions of years ago, when the first microbes learned how to use the air. This is why breath feels sacred, not just because it keeps us alive, but because it connects us to everything that ever lived, to forests, oceans, stars, to the long timeline of the universe, to the first flicker of light in the cosmos. The first breath of everything is I. And you in me, in the birds outside your window, in the roots beneath your feet. It is a presence, quiet and invisible but constant. We rarely notice it. It enters and exits over and over without asking anything in return. But it is there, shaping every moment. The first breath of everything is not a single breath. It is a continuum, a current, a gentle flowing reminder that life is not separate from the universe. It is its most tender unfolding. So as you rest, as you close your eyes, as you inhale softly, remember this: that breath is not yours alone. It is borrowed from a planet that learned to breathe. It is gifted from stars that no longer shine. It is shared with every being that has ever drawn it in. And in your breathing, you continue a story too ancient to name, too vast to end. The breath moves in. The breath moves out. The first breath of everything continues. Now let us follow that breath softly to its resting place, not an end, but a gentle pause in its journey. The first breath of everything does not vanish. It circulates, it transforms. It moves through creatures and clouds, through moss and mammal, through wind and wave. What began in the heart of ancient stars now hums through the smallest cells, floats through forests, swirls across oceans. It has passed through lungs that no longer live. It has fed leaves that have long since fallen. And yet it remains present, invisible, essential. Consider this: every breath you take may hold a molecule once inhaled by a trilobite, or exhaled by a brontosaurus, or caught in the leaf of a fern millions of years ago. These molecules are not destroyed, they are exchanged, passed gently between all who live and all who have ever lived. In this quiet cycle we are all connected, not by memory or by blood, but by breath. The first breath of everything moves through all of us, binding us in silence, in life, in time. And this breath is not limited to Earth. Scientists now search other worlds for signs of it, not just for oxygen, but for the potential of breath. Telescopes scan the skies for faint patterns in starlight that reveal atmospheric secrets. Spectral fingerprints tell us what a distant planet holds: hydrogen, methane, carbon dioxide, or perhaps oxygen. And when they find that sign, it's more than a chemical marker, it's a whisper, a hint that breath may be possible elsewhere. That the story of life is not just an earthly tale, but a cosmic one. We imagine in our quietest hopes that somewhere across the galaxies there are other lungs drawing other air, that the first breath of everything did not end with us, that it moves softly through other atmospheres, other forests, other lives, perhaps in silence, perhaps in song, but always in rhythm. Even here on Earth, the rhythm of breath is poetry, a tide within us, an ocean of motion we rarely notice, and yet it guides us, it steadies us, it tells us we are alive. When we are afraid, breath shortens. When we rest, it deepens. When we speak, it dances with words. And when we sleep, it soothes us like waves on a shore. All of this, every inhale, every exhale, is a continuation of that ancient act. It is the universe remembering itself through you. There is beauty in the fact that breath is shared, that the oxygen we use returns to the air, that what we release becomes food for the trees, that what the trees give becomes our lifeline again. This mutual care, silent, automatic, is one of the oldest agreements on the planet. We do not sign it, we do not speak it, but we honor it with every moment we live. The first breath of everything is not just air, it is trust, it is balance. It is the invisible thread between species, ecosystems, time. And though we have altered the sky with smoke and machines, the breath continues. It adapts. It finds its way through forests regrowing, oceans rebalancing, lungs healing. Life leans into breath always. Even when the world wavers, breath persists. It waits, it renews. And in that waiting, it reminds us to return not to a beginning, but to presence, to the now, to this breath. So when you stand near a tree or walk beside a field or sit by a stream, pause, inhale, exhale. The air you draw has passed through ancient things, has traveled from the sea, the soil, the stars, has been shaped by light, by leaf, by time. It is not just what you need, it is what you are. The first breath of everything is not a gift to be taken, it is a relationship to be kept. And when your breath ends, it will not vanish, it will return to the cycle. The atoms will disperse, join wind and rain, enter root and wing and become something else, someone else. The breath continues. It always has, it always will. That is the lesson of the stars and the forests and the lungs, that the universe does not waste its breath. It recycles it, it honors it, it carries it forward in silence. You are a part of that carrying. You are a bearer of the first breaths. Let it move through why. Oh, with wonder. Let it leave you gently so that others may breathe and begin again.